Hi guys, it's Ross over at the Daily Jaws and welcome back to the show. And today I am joined by a very special and unique guest. Today I am joined by a man who is in sharks and he's got one of the most interesting job titles and inspiration stories around Jaws that I've heard in a long time. Guys, please welcome Rowan Byrne to the Daily Jaws. Rowan, welcome.
Brilliant. Nice to be here, Ross. Always good to talk to a fellow shark enthusiast.
Oh, absolutely. When I saw you on Facebook commenting about how Jaws inspired you to get into this incredible career that you've had, I knew that I just had to speak to you and talk about the journey you've had and also how Jaws continues to inspire and be relevant, not just to someone like yourself, but people who are maybe entering this world of shark conservation and how we should be looking to protect sharks in every way we can.
Absolutely.
However, there is something we need to just get out of the way while I've still got my elocution. Is basically possibly the most spectacular job title I think I've ever seen. So your job title, this is according to LinkedIn, and I'll put it up on screen, viewers, so you can read along with me, is Senior Associate Marine Ecology and Marine Freshwater Aquatic Plastics Sustainability Specialist.
Well, there's a reason for that. I'm basically a marine biologist with a lot of roles, and I have many barrels and many oceans. Keeping an eye out for all the different types of work. But yeah, I do a lot of roles in my current position,
Yeah.
but it always brings me back to the one thing, which is the marine environment and all the different challenges that the marine environment faces in the world at the moment. Trying to do some good.
And what is the sort of the priority for your work at the moment?
Well, it'll be plastics, if I'm being straight with you, Ross. And the way that plastics is its own pandemic in the oceans, and the impacts it has from the abyssal zones down at 3,000 meters, 10,000 feet, 12,000 feet. You know, the depth of the Titanic, we've got plastic down there. In the midwater column, we've got plastic. On the surface, we've got plastic. On the beaches, we've got plastic. So for me, my number one mantra is to leave the place in a better position, leave the earth in better position than we found it. So good legacy. And most important, find solutions. We must find solutions to the problems that we've created, let's be honest, and the impacts we have. And one of them is plastic. Another one obviously is overfishing and pollutants and climate change. And it all comes back to one species that kind of has the tagline for keeping these problems going, and that's ourselves. So my focus is solutions and legacy. And but at the moment, it's plastics, it's sea turtles, it's sharks, it's energy in the marine environment, but anything in the marine environment, Ross. And I'm there to help see what I can do.
Oh, amen to that. It's really inspiring to have people like yourself just on the show and be able to share some of that wisdom and insights. I think a lot of people see Jaws as a shark movie, but there are a lot of people that love sharks because of the movie. When did you first see the movie, and when did you realize that this was having quite an impact on you?
Well, I was too young to really see the movie because I went a couple of years after it came out, I came across it. But I grew up in Dublin in Ireland. I grew up by the coast. So as a child, I would wander down to the beach at low tide, and I'd harass the life out of crabs. And I'd look under rocks, and I'd look for strawberry anemones, and I'd look for little blennies, or I'd look for shrimp, crangan, or I'd look for anything in the intertidal pools that would fill me with wonderment, because I'd be like, geez, look at all these things. These are amazing. What are they? I have no clue, and then something else would distract me. And then I might find a fossil on a rock. I didn't know it was a fossil, but it was an interesting shape. So I grew up on the coast in Dublin. And I think one of my earliest memories was there was a fish and chip shop. It's a sad story, but it's a good story because it got me really interested. I saw a mako shark that was caught in Dublin Bay, a short fin mako, and it was, people eat shark and fish and chips, and they call it different names, hake and rock salmon and different things. But this was a whole maybe 6 or 8 feet long short fin mako in Dublin Bay in the late 80s.
Mm.
What the hell is that thing? But of course, they put it in the front of the chip shop, and all you saw were these beautiful conical teeth, so a pinpoint at the top and lovely and smooth on the sides, and just falling out of the mouth of a shark. And of course, I was a young child and I saw this and I was like, oh my God, what is this? And I think that's one of the things that led me on to study, to look into sharks for wonderment. But it was growing up by the coast, exposed to all the elements, looking at all the critters that was there. And I still do. I'll be honest. I go on holidays. I'm going straight to the beach. I'm going to go have a look. I'm going to see what's in the rock pools. It was the same in South Africa many years ago. We were there for cage diving and more. I'll go straight to the beach, and with another friend of mine who's a marine biologist, and we were just busman's holidays, and just go there. The place is full of wonder, not just the sharks, not just the elasmobranchs, not just the rays, the skates, the marine mammals, just on the foreshore. Go down and have a look. There's loads of cool stuff.
Mm. And obviously, I mean, Jaws is an interesting movie because it seems to have a very clear fence when it comes to sharks. You're either fearful or fascinated, and obviously, you've gone down the fascinated route.
Absolutely.
Why do you think some people might go down that route, and why do you think other people might go down the fearful route?
Well, the one thing about the divide that would be education. So Jaws was very educational. Jaws introduced people to sharks. It also introduced them to their own paranoia, and like I'm not going in the swimming pool, I'm not going in the bath, and they didn't entertain the wonderment that these creatures give you, and when I looked into it a little bit more, you're like, how long are these fellas around for? Oh God, millions of years, and why do their teeth survive? How does that work? And what was a meg what? Do you know what I mean? It just inspired me to learn more about them. And I can understand why people might think it's not for me, I'm not getting the water, I'm not putting my toe in the water. I can understand that. But let's be realistic here. There's 600 plus species of sharks and growing. Less than 10 of those would be even interested in giving you a nibble, right? I'd say less than 5. You'd have the oceanic whitetip, you'd probably have a tiger, you'd have a white shark, you'd have other species of Carcharodontidae, the normal reef sharks you find. You might be unlucky and get a rogue shark who's a bit maligned, a bit sick, etc. But at the end of the day, let's look at statistics. I mean, the International Shark Trial will give you all the difference on the tax. But I know for a fact that more people die falling off the toilet every year in America than they do get bitten by sharks. So it's, the next time you're going to the toilet, you need to be careful. The next time you go and swimming, you also need to be careful too. But the chances are minuscule. And look, with greatest respect to circumstances where people have lost their lives, it's usually because we've put ourselves in that position. And a shark is a hunter, plain and simple, like an orca killer whale, like bottlenose dolphins, like sea turtles and jellyfish, like big species of grouper, getting all smaller fish, etc., etc. That's life. That's the way it is. But if we find ourselves in the wrong position at the wrong time, then sharks will just do their normal thing. You can't malign a shark for doing what it does. And nearly, I'm trying to think of the movie now, but like eats, sleeps, swims, repeats.
Eat, swim, make little sharks. Yeah,
that's basically it.
Exactly.
And I mean, I do see a change over the last number of years where, we'll say, the social media side of things has given a better platform to understand more about sharks. Now, Peter Benchley, as you know, he would have said he wouldn't have written the book if he knew exactly what the impact it would have had on sharks, on people's paranoia, people's fear. And I understand that. But I'm glad he wrote it because he created a whole generation of Generation X and more who are aware, even if nothing else, that's really important for conservation. Being aware of the plight of sharks, between finning, between overfishing, between habitat destruction, between lack of research and conservation. I mean, put it this way, we find wonderment in sharks. And I'll give you one example. Like, I worked for a guy called Dr. Samuel Gruber at the University of Miami. And the first time I came across sharks in Bimini in 1997, in an Irish fella going over, a white fella, like white as an Irish can be, going over there, going over to Miami, often to Bimini, small islands, never seen a mangrove before, surrounded by sharks, bull sharks, lemon sharks, everything. And you're working for one of the world's best shark biologists. Because the reason why I say that is Dr. Gruber was, in the late 70s, one of the individuals who worked with the US Navy. And he found out about the Moses soulfish. And he couldn't figure out why sharks didn't eat this flatfish, a plaice, in other words. It's a bit like a small flatfish. And he said when they eat it, they spit it out. And he couldn't understand why. So when he saw the shark biting the Moses sole would release a very thick and viscous substance, which, when you think of it logically, it was something like shampoo, that viscosity, that thickness, that sort of texture. And it would actually, the shark would spit out the fish after it ate it. Now, the reason being, obviously, you think, well, sharks need to move forward to oxygenate their gills, so they've got some sticky stuff. They need to dilute it. But it was something more brilliant, and nature pointed the way, because in the Moses sole fish in the Red Sea, they had a small compound called sodium lauryl sulfate as part of the actual chemical they released. Now, sodium lauryl sulfate is found in toothpaste and found in shampoos. So the logic thing is that if you have a compound that aggravates the gill of a shark, it's also viscous and dense, and the shark has to wash it through his gills and leave, so he'll flee. So nature tells you how to deal with certain circumstances. Nature finds a way. And the other, there's just so many examples of learning from research from some of the pioneers. There was Don Nielsen in University of California as well. He did work on horn sharks in California. Peter Page, forgive me, Peter, who did the work in the Faroe Islands with pregnant great white sharks, and they come up there to feed on elephant seals. I watched all of those with wonderment. Now,
Yeah.
it is nature at its wildest, and you don't want to be putting yourself in that position. But I couldn't get enough of it. No disrespect to David Attenborough, but I was at every other avenue to find lots of information about sharks. And then, of course, the work they do in Natal in South Africa, and the public autopsies. And I don't know, it's probably my nature, but I grew up by the coast, and I just enjoy everything that they offer, and just everything about their sensor biology. And when I got to university, like in the late early 1990s, towards my last year, I took a year out and I worked in Mexico, and I worked in Bahamas, and I worked in the south of Ireland on different species of sharks. And when I went back to university, and this is the best one, and I'd like to dedicate this interview if I can to my then tutor, who's a marine biologist, and his name was Dr. Fish. You couldn't get a better name. You just couldn't. And his wife was Susan Fish. So we had Fish and Fish teaching me about marine biology, which was fantastic. But I went back to John Fish. He's a man from Derby in Aberystwyth, and I basically said, John, I've wrote my dissertation. Look, I've been so excited about the sensory biology of sharks. I've written it to you. And he went, okay, give us a look at it. And I'd written like 7,000 or 8,000 words. And of course, I thought it was the best. And he just slated it. I got there about 500 words before I knew it. But that's the best part about it, because I'd been away. I'd worked with scallops, hammerheads in Baja California under Professor Carlos Villavicencio, and I traveled that, and there was some wonderful times there with manta rays and more, and southern stingrays. But look, I'm getting carried away, and I make no apologies for it, but the world of sharks and elasmobranchs and the marine environment, we have to protect. We have to understand more about it. It's absolutely abysmal that we're sending people to space when we don't know what's in our own front garden, which is in the oceans, and we're wasting money up there. And the most important species among many are endangered species, but the top of that, in my estimation, would be sharks, because they regulate the ocean's health. They make creatures genetically stronger to a thing called fitness, and they tell you about the health of the environment. It's the same with sea turtles. I've worked with them. I mean, and it's a case of, we are unfortunately putting more plastic, more toxins, more hydrocarbons, more pollutants in the oceans, and it's at near tipping point. And when you look at maligned creatures such as sharks, DDT or petrochemicals in marine mammals, you have to ask yourself why you're doing this, what's happening, how do we stop this? So, but without sharks, we won't have a healthy ocean. They regulate it. So, and we still don't know why they're highly immune to cancer. We still don't know how they survive for so long. We still don't know how can they smell one drop of blood in 10 million parts of water from a half a kilometer away. Their lateral line system, why do they not get external? This is the one thing actually I've been asked many times. When you look at things that don't biofoul in the ocean, in other words, stuff that grow, anything in the ocean, stuff will grow on it, but it doesn't grow in seagrass, if a healthy seagrass, and it doesn't grow in shark skin. And it's because of the dermal denticles, the placoid scales they have on them, that basically stops things from growing on them. I mean, you will get the odd remora sticking to them as well, but that's on the undersurface. That'll be on the ventral surface. So it's it's just wonder, Ross. I got carried away. I'm sorry, but there's so much important things out there we need to preserve and understand even more.
Honestly, there is. I mean, that was incredible. First of all, thank you so much, because it's
Right.
genuinely amazing to speak to someone who is just so excited and in awe of the world and the planet, you know, that we live on, and that you work very closely with. And there was so much to unpack there. I think one of the things you mentioned just about Jaws, just to come back to that for a second, was the paranoia.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, Jaws has been seen as a metaphor for certain paranoias, you know, Vietnam, Nixon, and so forth. But you're right; it taps into something very, very primal, and
Yeah.
paranoia
Yeah.
and fear is a big thing. I think what you were talking about in terms of the plastics, from what I understand, and obviously you're the man to ask to elaborate on this, is that we're now starting to see the plastics that we're dumping in the ocean find its way back into our digestive system through the fish that we're
Yes,
eating.
into your bloodstream and heart.
Yeah.
Only last week, I read an article where they found trace elements. The Japanese surgeons found trace elements of plastic molecules in the musculature of human heart.
Mhm.
So it stands to reason, Ross. And I know I've gone off on a rant, but there's a thing called the circular economy, and that is keeping plastics in a loop so it doesn't release to the environment. It's what
Mm.
the recycling specialists and waste specialists use. But I put that in a different track. The circular economy to me is that what you put in the ocean eventually goes into the food chain, works its
Mm.
way up the food chain to the apex predators, such as sharks. But who's the apex predator of sharks? It's ourselves.
Yeah.
So what you find is that what you put into the sausage machine that is the ocean, the resultant coming out, that if it is edible, will have these. It's called bioaccumulation into the tissues of fish and marine mammals, whatever it is, whatever your preference is, even shellfish, and it works your way into you. Now, the most stressing thing is that plastic compounds have been found in breast milk. So what you're looking at a scenario where it's passed through two membranes in order to get to the baby, and
Mm.
then to be part of their tissues. And I remember years and years ago, 2000, I was working in Dominica in the Caribbean. I was working on beautiful sea turtles. And I remember reading a paper, and it was to do with plastic. So this is back like the paper's from 1996. And it showed that giant leatherback sea turtles and other species of sea turtles, when they ate plastic bags, mistaking them for jellyfish, eventually, if they didn't die or asphyxiate because it blocked up their internal system and they couldn't float, they couldn't dive, and blah blah blah, the small trace elements of plastics would work their way into the developing shells of newborn sea turtle hatchlings. So when the female comes up and lays the eggs in the
Mm.
nest, if she has ingested plastic compounds or equivalent, they'll be transferred through normal biological processes into the shell of developing sea turtle eggs. Small hatchlings that have 1 in 1,000's chance to make it to adulthood 30 to 50 years from now. And
Mm.
even before they developed, they're in a shell that has a component of plastic in it. So it's and you know it's just mind blowing, and you know we have a problem with plastics. It's probably more of a habit, and I will say, I know we're talking about Jaws, but I will say that plastic isn't the enemy. Absolutely not the enemy. It does harm, but because we've misused it, or
Yeah.
misplaced it, or abused it. So that's
Mm.
why it's important that if we have the cycle together and the process, and designers need to think, well, what's going to happen at the end of life of this pen, right? What's going to happen to this pen?
Yeah.
How can we reuse it? So at the design stage, they need to think of end of life, and that's very important where it is. But look,
Yeah.
as I won't make any apologies for being shy and retiring.
The thing is, for me, I mean, it reminds me of a project. I think it's still going, because to your point around where Peter Benchley said that if you know, he was sorry that he'd written the book, or the impact on sharks that the book had had. I think, to be honest with you, someone was going to write a book about sharks at some point in that vein, because obviously there'd been movies about bears and alligators and piranhas, and you know, all those kind of
Yeah,
creature features
absolutely.
were kind of fashionable. So I think that would have happened at some point. And I think we were actually in some ways very, very lucky that someone like Steven Spielberg got hold of the director's chair for the movie, and that Benchley was mindful enough to then focus him and also his wife, Wendy, focus their efforts on conservation once they realized actually there's a huge amount of influence we have now in this world, in this arena, and we could do something really positive with it. Recently, I think it was this year, Steven Spielberg basically publicly apologized for the impact that Jaws had on sharks. What did you make of that? You didn't see that? I'll try and find a quote for it and stick it up on the screen. But yeah, he basically apologized for the impact that Jaws had on sharks.
Well, I that's fair play to him for doing that, because I would probably disagree with him, if I'm being honest with you. I know sharks had been maligned and they had been misunderstood, and they through no fault of their own, the people decided to fear them. Then people started to look into the attacks and what have you. And of course, we know the statistics there, etc. But I look, each to their own. But I actually think he should be celebrating Jaws. He should be celebrating it. He shouldn't be apologizing for it, because for me, he inspired my life and has given me fantastic opportunities to learn about the evolution, the physiology, the biology, the ecology, everything about these creatures in the marine environment. And even though I grew up beside the sea, I didn't know what it was half the time. And these triggers, whether it's David Attenborough, whether it's Ron and Valerie Taylor in Australia, whether it was the National Geographic documentaries, whether it was Jaws, they inspire us. So I don't, I mean, each to their own, but I don't think, I think we should be celebrating Jaws more and more, because it's made people understand. I mean, look at the ecotourism that comes from shark tourism. Look at the interest people want to see these things in the wild. Then that makes people think, hang on, there's not many of these left, is there? Where can we go and see them? How can we help them? What can we do? And that's a logical progression. So even with Peter Benchley's thoughts of what he's created, and maybe sorrowful in some ways, and even with Stephen's apology, I still think we should celebrate what they've done. I mean, even with Steve Alton, with Meg, do you know what I mean? It's brought a whole new interest to kids and fossils. I mean, like, I show my son, when I showed him a megalodon tooth, he was like, what the, you know, and it just creates the interest. And of course, it brings some dinosaurs with Jurassic Park, so they're not going to apologize for that. Do you know what I mean? It creates a whole new insight and a whole new generation who are interested in these things. You'll always have the few who might kick and knock these things, but generally the education tends to circumvent that. But at the end of the day, we live in a wonderful planet that's full of beautiful biodiversity that we still don't understand. We're destroying it, sadly, and sharks are the mainstay of that, and they're just so important.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about your personal relationship with Jaws in terms of the movie. So in terms of your, how can I put this? Your personal relationship with the movie, has it changed over the years? Because my relationship with Jaws certainly has. But what about you?
It's got stronger, much stronger, because I sometimes now over the last year, I have it on in the background when I'm pottering about the house. Do you know what I mean? Like I do, and I have the posters and everything knocking about where I could see them. No, it's got stronger. It sounds a bit silly, but I just, because I love to relive when I first saw it in my head when I keep seeing it. In other words, it's like nostalgic to me. So I fall in love with it every time I see it. And of course, the new love I have is that I now understand the detail they had in Bruce. You know, the eyes, the gum line, the way the teeth were shaped, the movements. And, you know, I'm absolutely awe-inspired when I see the pictures on your website about the old background imagery of Jaws. Yeah. I'm telling you, it is like, Jesus, that's how they did it. And you know, and then you hear stories like it sank. Oh God, what did they do? And and of course, it was Steven Spielberg who said, I think Bruce is only in the movie for 9 minutes total. 4, there you go. Do you know what I mean? And of course, he said, like, it was a godsend we had the barrels. Do you know what I mean? Like, and then it was all about, you know, and then it was all about the once you heard, you know, James's music, you just come across and you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. But for me, I fall in love with it all the time. I see something new all the time, and of course, all the eagle-eyed viewers that share the site, they point out the shooting stars, and they point out all the barrels in Jaws 2 that are now in Chief Brody's garden in Jaws 2. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And all that sort of stuff. And these are the things I haven't seen. So I fall in love with it again and again on a daily basis, thanks to your viewers, your listeners, the Facebook page. And I see things that I haven't seen before. And it's like, Jesus, there's that thing there. You're right. And they're probably subtle. Even like, I think it was the other day, somebody drew the outline of the final beach with a Sharpie. And
Yes.
it looked like Bruce's mouth,
Brilliant.
open, and these are. You can't tell me that's not a good thing. You can't.
It's
Great.
and this is the incredible thing. I mean, we're myself and Dean, who runs the Daily Jaws with me. We're in a really lucky position because we get to see Jaws almost from the top down, because we get to see all of the other Facebook pages, all the other Facebook groups. We get sent a lot of ideas for content, and we do a lot of research. We've got bookshelves packed full of stuff, and we get insights into things that are maybe coming in terms of products or launches or whatever. But the thing is as well, you don't even need any of that new stuff to still be able to go back and appreciate the movie, because like there's always a little something new to spot. We did an article recently about, did Hendrix miss his chance to kill the shark? So there's a bit when he's on the boat, and this is when they're trying to protect the swimmers during the 4th of July beach scene, and there's something just goes by in the background. And one of a fan wrote in and said, I think this might be the shark. Did Hendrix miss the chance? And I'm like, write something about it. Let's pose the question to the community. And we got the clip, we slowed it down, we zoomed in, and we let people make up their own mind. Some people are like, it's the kids with the fin. Some people are like, it's definitely the shark. Some people are like, it's just a wave, Ross. What are you on about? There are just so many different ways to interpret this movie. And this is nearly 50 years old. I mean, it's incredible to think that it's 50 years old and people are still looking at and enjoying this movie. And one of the things, just your point about sharks as well with the new gen, I think people like yourself and also drones as well. I mean, I used to work for a technology company, so I have an interesting relationship with technology. I think it can be like anything; it can be brilliant. Sometimes I think it can be just an absolute curse. Like I guess your opinion of plastic. It's all like how well we use it as a species.
Absolutely.
But like drones, for example, I mean, they are giving us such amazing insights into the behavior of sharks. And also there is some absolutely stunning footage of great white sharks swimming in and around surfers who probably don't even know the sharks are there. And the sharks, to your point before, they're just not interested. They're curious, but they're not out to kill us. They're not out to get us. And every now and again, when the newspapers print a sensationalized story, I mean, we saw one which was kill a shark on the coast of the UK. And we had another friend of ours who's a shark expert, a guy called Christian Parton. Hi, Christian, if you're watching. He pointed out, that's a basking shark fin. That's a harmless shark.
Absolutely, yeah.
But it sells newspapers. And so what we'll do is we'll then we'll post that headline and we'll go hashtag Jaws is not a documentary, hashtag this is a basking shark, hashtag know what you're talking about. So there's the whole the media's perception of sharks hasn't really changed, but I think what's happening is the new gen don't actually pay a huge amount of attention to the mainstream media. They look to influencers and role models or whoever on social, and they get their information from that. And there are some amazing people to follow, and which is why I guess as the Daily Jaws, our juggling act is celebrate the movie. To your point, celebrate it as much as we can for the craft and the impact it had on cinema and the emergence of this amazing talent, Steven Spielberg, who hasn't done too bad, but also juxtapose that with here's the truth about sharks, here's the reality, and it's an interesting juggling act to do, but it's being able to connect with people like yourself and filmmakers, and you see this beautiful mesh come together, and it's like, actually, yeah, you're right, Jaws is something that we should absolutely be celebrating, which brings me to an interesting point. You are channeling your inner Hooper right now. Honestly, I've got a picture of Richard Dreyfuss up on my screen, and it's difficult to tell the difference. So, is that deliberate? Is that something you've done deliberately for the interview, or is that your default?
I don't know. It's probably not been hard to get a haircut, but I think it might be subliminal. I don't know, but it's I'd have to think about it. But because a couple of days ago I was asked what marine biologist influenced you, and I My immediate answer was Hooper from Jaws. I mean, most people say Jacques Cousteau, and I would say Jack. If there was three people, there was four people I could have dinner with. One would be Billy Connolly, one would be Barack Obama, one would be Jacques Cousteau, and the other one probably would be Hooper. Do you know what I mean? And sit down and sing a dude with spare Spanish ladies and more. But it's no, I don't know. It's maybe it is. You could be onto something, but so if it's shorter hair, it might be James Hetfield from Metallica with no glasses. But who knows? Never mind. We'll see.
What do you make of Hooper in Jaws? Because I know there's a glimpse of a shark expert in Jaws 2. Jaws 3, there isn't really a shark expert. And then Jaws the Revenge, Michael Brody is sort of the marine biologist, but he's not necessarily a shark expert. So what do you think of Hooper, Richard Dreyfuss's performance, the whole portrayal of that character and that profession?
I think that's a great question. I've never thought about that before. I think he was very good, and I'll say because he brought the same interest and wonderment. He portrayed the same interest and wonderment in sharks that I can resonate with, to be honest with you.
Mm.
And he had the tech. You mentioned the tech there. He had the boat. He had the tech. He could do that. The Oceanographic Institute background, the academic stuff. He conveyed that well, but he was also a little bit down to earth as well. And it was like. What was it? Quinn said to me, "It proves one thing to me that rich college boys like you don't have the
education enough to admit when you're wrong."
Exactly.
Possibly my favorite line in the movie.
It's a fantastic line, and of course he could see he tries. He didn't want to be that academic who had, and I say this politely, who was very much enveloped in an academia world and a little bit disassociated from the real world. It sometimes is a bubble in either of those spectrums, and it's hard to get a bridge between both. He offered that. He portrayed that, and it was very good. But no, I think he did really well because he, like you said, he brought the shark cage. He brought the chemicals. He brought the technology. All that sort of stuff. And I think it was a great mix. You had Quint, a seasoned fisherman, shark fisherman, who knew intrinsically more than science, much more than science. I've often found that people who abide by the ocean or the jungles or the savanna plains in Africa, whatever, they know more about the critters than you think you do. And I've learned that many years, and I've aligned myself to these people. But Hooper was very good. I think it was a fantastic mix. We had Brody, we had Quint, we had Hooper. And it was just they couldn't have got three more charismatic individuals working well together.
And I think it's a really interesting point that you make about Quint as well, because you've got the seasoned, the grizzled, the experienced shark hunter, and you've obviously got Hooper with the new technology and the wonderment and the awe and the enthusiasm and excitement. And then you've got Brody in the middle of that, who's never really been in this world at all. And when he kind of comes, when he gets to the end of his story, which I think is a really interesting aspect of his character arc, is that he kind of has an attitude of the both of them meshed together, where he can appreciate the wonderment in such a magnificent creature, but he's also very cautious and wary, not to the point of, say, the vengefulness that Quint might experience, but it's a beautiful mesh of the two. And I think that's when he goes back to the island with a fresh outlook on life, in terms of just having that balance. Because he, at the beginning of the movie, Brody was totally conformed. He was totally duty bound husband and everything else, but he goes back with a slightly different perspective on the world just by basically hunting a fish, which I think is the genius of Spielberg, the genius of Jaws, and also Cole Gottlieb and Peter Benchley, who wrote the screenplay. So I think there's a lot of other stuff into playing there. From a scientific point of view, bearing in mind, we probably as a public, we didn't really have a huge amount of information about sharks, and we certainly, they weren't on the public consciousness in the way that they were after Jaws. From a scientific point of view, how realistic do you think Jaws is in terms of portraying the shark in its nature, its behavior, and everything else?
Well, I think I'll go back to there was a very esteemed shark biologist from South Africa, and it might have even been the chap who run the shark attack file in the museum in the US. But he said Jaws was a mishmash of fables from the point of view of what a shark would do. And I don't know why it always resonates with me. But the thing about it is, I think his point was the behavior shown by a particular shark, in culmination of all the behaviors, is a fable. That's not going to ever happen. And what you might find, you'll have pockets of sharks, pockets of behaviors in individual sharks or not. But the one thing that it did illustrate was that the behavior that was shown, both in its normal behavior where it consumes individuals and fish and whatever and does damage, it's natural. They are inquisitive to boats. They are inquisitive to people. They are inquisitive to poor Pipette. God bless him, this poor dog. They are inquisitive. And what it did was it brought. I think when Peter Benchley, I mean, I guess here, when he was doing his research of the book, he obviously saw certain bits of behavior at certain stories, and brought those together because they're real behaviors. They're proven behaviors. They're documented behaviors. I mean, I remember reading a story when the Australian free diver who had 462 stitches. I forget
Rodney Fox, the abalone spear fisherman. Yes.
There you go. And I remember reading a book on sharks. I mean, I was probably too young to buy these books because they had grotesque pictures in the middle of them, which were just real raw light.
Yeah.
But I remember reading about Rodney Fox and seeing that. And there was another story in the same book about a tiger shark that was caught, and it had the arm of a boxer in it. And they didn't know
I've
it was a boxer.
got that book somewhere. I know the book you'll read. Yeah, you're talking about.
And then, of course, it helped them trace back to the identity of the individual and blah blah blah. So it's the behavior of sharks is well documented. Some of it's massively undocumented. We need to research it more. But I think taking the reality that these individual behaviors are and bringing them into one particular revengeful 3D, Jaws 3D mother shark coming in to come and do the damage, that's a bit of a myth. But let's be honest, that if you're a baby shark and you've just been born to the world, the first thing you need to do is get away from your mom because she's going to nibble you, plain and simple. That's what happens when I've seen it with bull sharks in the Brisbane River. I've seen it in the Caribbean. When sharks come in to give birth, depending on whatever type of reproduction, they give birth. The newborn sharks have to get away from the mother because she can consume them. So it is, even before then, you have in uterine cannibalism, where sharks eat sharks inside the uterus. It's just mental. So, but how cool is that? I mean, without going on, like, evolution has decided for you to be the most advantageous and badass fish in the sea, you have to eat your siblings before you're even born. Now, where, I don't even know the answer to this question, where has that come from in evolution for survival of the fittest to be so extreme and to be so developed? And you're not even fully neonatal developed as well. It's just wonderful. It's not for obviously the individuals getting nibbled, but it's wonderful to understand how evolution designed these things. And there's one law in nature: the fittest survived. So you have the fittest traits, you'll survive. Keep the fittest traits, you'll live on. That's it.
Yeah, and it's amazing. And you've just reminded me of the question that I forgot to ask you. So viewers, if you're watching, I had a moment where I just completely forgot what I was going to ask Rowan, but now I've remembered, so I can ask the question. In Jaws, Hooper talks about a thresher shark, I think it was, taking apart his rowing boat when he was about 10, which is what inspired him to study sharks. Have you had any close calls with sharks?
Oh, yeah, quite a few. Each one getting better and better. I mean, they go from the mild and romanticized to maximum and scares the poop out of you. I mean, like in the Philippines in 2000, when I worked there, I lived in a nipa hut by the beach, and I got to know, I was there working on sea turtles and dugongs, and I would see lots of sharks in the environment, in the fish markets. So I got to know everybody there, and I told them I like sharks, blah, blah, blah. So one morning I get on my door at 6 a.m., and the dog thinks now there's someone at the door. There was a knock at the door, and there was two Filipino children, looking to sell a coral cat shark to me, who was still alive. Coral cat sharks are quite robust. It was obviously out of the water a while, but they can survive a little bit longer than most. And I was right on the shoreline with my nipa hut. So I gave the two children about 10 pesos, I don't know, 10p, whatever it was. They were delighted. and just walked into the sea, flat calm sea, on an island facing into offshore islands. And I took the coral cat shark and I walked him straight into the water up to waist deep. And I basically, and then one of the things Dr. Gruber told me in the Bahamas, in order to oxidate shark gills, you do S-shaped exaggerated swim patterns like this in order to get them going, and then eventually let them go. And of course, you keep them supported. Obviously, they're heavier than water. And I remember walking into the water with this coral cat shark and resuscitating it, for want of a better expression. And then off it swam. And I remember, and I can still see it, this small dorsal fin and just penetrating the water surface, swimming off on clear, calm water with a rising sun, and just swimming off into the abyss. And it was fantastic. And of course, even just the texture of a shark's skin, it's amazing. It's amazing. Yeah. And then it goes to the extreme end of it, where I was in South Africa in 2010, doing some cage diving, and we had a cage door that we could slide back and forth, and watching great white sharks get the measure of you, watching their eye, watching them disappearing into the left and coming back from underneath, disappearing to the right and coming from above the surface. And you're like, forgive me, I'll be very Irish, go, Jesus, Mary and Joseph, they're huge. One of them, it's actually two ends to this, but one of them there was a wrangler, and they took the bait, and the shark came straight towards the cage. And I think I had a Nikon D50 or D100 then. They could take sequential pictures straight away. And one shark came straight in towards, and the bait was pulled, but he couldn't stop, obviously, because they don't have brakes. And he went straight into the cage. And I have about 7 pictures of 15 feet, 10 feet, 5 feet, a meter, and then a couple of inches, and the nose is on my lens. And it's in the cage, and I'm literally like this, and I was just like most people probably would have had to go and change their wetsuit, but I wanted more. I'm not Bravo. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm not brave and all that, but I mean, I was scared, crapless, scared. But oh my God, absolutely wonderful. And then in the same trip, I was sitting on the bow of the boat, sitting on the stern, sitting in the back, and a great white shark took the bait and went down. And this is how I learned it's not a good place to sit. And the shark came shooting straight up, right? And I remember it because I had a Sigma super wide angle lens on my camera. And he jumped up, and it was about 6 feet of a shark above the water looking at me, and then fell, and his nose fell and hit the bow of the boat, literally passed through my legs as it fell down. And I was sitting on the bow of the boat, and of course the boat went like this, and I just stayed where I was in a silly place. I was sitting in the wrong place. Didn't know the shark was going to do that. Learned me lesson. But I have a picture of probably a 15-footer shark with 6 to 7 feet of it, pectoral fins out, and all I can see is the red growth of ectoparasites on its skin. I can see the scar marks of recent activities, whatever it was doing. And it scared the living life out of me. But you just have to be in awe of these things. Thankfully, I tell the tale, but I'm not going to sit in the bow of the boat or the stern of the boat in a hurry anytime soon. But there's quite a few more, but each time, I suppose it's a bad thing to say, I'm bitten. Not literally. I'm bitten by the bug of sharks every time I get close to them and see them. So it's just wonderful. It's wonderful.
It seems like you've worked in a lot of different places with a lot of great people. Does the subject of Jaws ever sort of come up in discussion with those kind of people? And if it does, what do those conversations kind of look like?
The topic of Jaws usually comes up because I brought it up, if I'm being honest. Because it's like, you say a quote or you're wearing the T-shirt or something like that. You know what I mean? It does come up periodically, and you get questions like, are you all right in the head to be working with sharks? And I said, well, yeah, of course I am. I'm all right. So, but have you seen Jaws? I said, yeah, I know, but that's not true. That stuff doesn't happen all the time. That stuff happens periodically here and there, and blah, blah, blah. It gives me a chance. Actually, Jaws gives me the benchmark or the opportunity to start talking and re-educating, if that's the right word, without being arrogant or anything like that. Letting people know about the real truth and the platform Jaws has given me and Generation X and more to talk about the real truth about sharks. I remember years ago, like when I was starting university, I wanted to write a book called The Truth About Sharks. And I think there's one or two books that have come out with that title since many moons ago. But that's what we need. That's what Jaws has given us, a chance to talk about the truth about sharks. It's
Yeah.
not all about eating the Kettner boy. It's not all about, the sensationalistic of the movie. It's not all about the HSS Indianapolis, even though that's true. It's about respecting a shark in its domain. The one thing that annoys me is that people malign sharks after attacks or incidents or whatever they are. And in actual fact, we are a visitor in their environment, plain and simple. So we have to abide by their rules, or we have to manage the risks that we know are there, because they're the lions of the Serengeti. They're the top of the food chain. So we have to be respectful of them. So look, Jaws gives me the chance to chat about sharks. It gives people to probably try and find if I'm certified or not. I still have a few sandwiches and me picnics left. But as you can see, I enjoy the opportunity, and I'm extremely thankful and appreciative of the opportunity that a movie about a fish has given me more zest for life.
And so what can we as Jaws fans do to try and re-educate ourselves and ultimately try and protect and maybe change the perception of sharks? What do you think we could do?
Well, so there's probably quite a lot. Immediately, it would be a case of understanding how massively they're in decline. The pro. I mean, another example would be not buying shark fin soup would be a good start. Not looking at ways to use having more sustainable fisheries, giving species a chance to procreate, to survive, and develop, rather than over harvesting and being cut down to near nothing. I mean, I think it was about 15 years ago, National Geographic had a document to say an article say that 90% of the global world shark populations has been wiped out. So when you think of it like that logically, the first thing we need to do is conserve. We need to do a bit of research, but maybe we don't even need to do more research. We just stop harming them, plain and simple. And if we don't have sharks, we don't have a healthy ocean. I mean, I will say that there's a thing called the shark pill. I don't know if you've heard of this, and it's I learned this a couple of years ago, and it always makes me laugh. Some viewers mightn't find this funny, but when you eat too much shark fin soup, you eventually, if you're a male, you become impotent. And the reason being that sharks store toxins and poisons, and particularly mercury, in their fins. So if you eat high concentrations of shark fin soup, the mercury makes makes the male impotent, plain and simple. So I call it the shark pill. It's a bit of it's not a good joke if you're on the receiving end of it, but it's better to it's one way of saying that you shouldn't eat things where they store toxins, for starters, and sharks need their fins. So I would stop overfishing as best you can, or have more sustainable fishing practices. I would do research on sharks that are in decline and in danger to understand. You mentioned a thresher shark. That's a great example from from Hooper's expressions. I would look at ways to protect sharks. It's probably be a bit controversial, but I don't understand sports fishing, and I don't understand targeting sharks. It's not a sport, because this is a shark taking bait. It's not a sport to the shark. And I don't understand why, when you tire an animal like that, a majestic creature like that, you tire it out and you put it back into the environment. 9 out of 10 times it'll be attacked by something. It will be injured or maligned. It will be fatigued and tired. It will be not at its height of fitness in order to survive. So you've damaged it. But I don't understand sports fishing. Each to their own, hands up, not my problem, but I don't see how it's a sport. So I would look to regulate those. And definitely tag and release if you had to do it. Bringing these sharks ashore, or bringing these critters ashore, I don't understand. So education is key, research and strict policies, but not paper policies. Stuff that works on the ground. Stuff that works from the ground up, where people are involved and manage sharks to protect that resource. You get it in coral reefs, you get it in lobster fisheries, you get it in other coastal fisheries, you get it in seagrass habitats. Protect that resource, because honestly, I know we're talking about jaws and sharks, But if we don't have the marine environment, we can't survive. That's it. It kills us. So what we need to do is protect something that regulates our climate, provides us with protein and food source, prevents us with, gives us all the enjoyment and mental health and recreational benefits, gives us all the beauties, aesthetics, and sounds and smells and everything. We need to protect that, because if we haven't got that, we're dead.
Yeah, it reminds me of I think I might have already mentioned it, but Mission Blue with
Oh
Dr.
yeah,
Sylvia Earle, and their message is very clear. It's no blue, no green,
oh yeah,
no
yeah.
ocean, no land. And I think we're slowly understanding that as a planet, we can't compartmentalize. So if we keep dumping our rubbish in the ocean, that's not a problem that's gone away. It is going to literally come back and wash up on our shores, and all these other terrible things that we're doing. And I think what you've just articulated there in terms of all of the ways that, you know, we can potentially, as an individual, try and impact, you know, these policies, you know, pressure our MPs or join an organization and support them. But say if someone wants to pursue a career in the ocean sciences, or specifically sharks. So apart from something I can't do anymore, but sadly, you know, if without sort of having to grow their hair, get the glasses, grow the beard, and go sort of maximum hooper, what advice would you give someone who wanted to maybe pursue this as a career? Where would you suggest they should maybe start?
Well, it's highly competitive, because when we're all teenagers or late in our teens or early 20s, we think we can save the world. We think we can, and we will do, and we'll try. Well, that's the way I felt when I was in that age anyway. I can only speak for myself. But the best thing is to do is to educate yourself, work with people. I mean, this will tell you how old I was, but about when I was 18 or 19, I wrote letters to authors and publishers of the books I had on sharks around my room to see how I could work with them. And I heard about the basking shark projects in Scotland and the west of Ireland, all sorts of how I could volunteer. So now it's a lot easier to get in contact with groups or individuals or authors or academics or whatever it is. So I would study is always the way to go. Educate yourself. There might be stuff on your doorstep, like an aquarium or something like that you could work in as an aquarist and build your way up in your knowledge. But I would study and learn as much as you could. Listen, I'm 48 years of age. I learn every day about something new about the oceans. It's amazing. So learn is always be a learned individual. But go to school, go to college, go to university, whatever works for you. You can learn in many different ways. Join a fishing boat, go work on a fishing boat, whatever works for you. But be open to learning, and you know, I think the world has changed a little bit. I'm more of a practical experience guy. We all have the academic qualifications, but I firmly believe that real life experience of the environment, learning and seeing these things up close and personal, expose yourself to them, go look at them, enjoy them, and then tell everybody. Who cares if someone tells you to shut up when it's your around and stop talking about sharks? That's my life. I don't care. You know, I'll tell you more about them. You know, and learn and just spread the knowledge. Just spread the knowledge and have a few pints of Guinness, and then tell people more about sharks in your travels, and spread the joy that sharks give you.
Amazing. So, Ro, last question before we wrap up. Where can people follow you? Where can they learn more about your work?
Well, they can. I'm not a frequent. Well, I'm on Twitter and I'm on Facebook, and I used to have a website called marinecreatures.com. I need to get that back up and running. But it's social media. You'll find me on social media: LinkedIn, Twitter. There isn't a day that goes by that I don't post something, or even a number of posts on my own profile on LinkedIn. And it's all about learning, creating that platform that people learn. So the usual social media platforms, probably Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook. I'm not a hard man to find. You can probably hear me, to be honest with you. You know, I'm not a quiet chap. You know, you probably hear me at some point. But yeah, no, I'm you know, a simple Google or a chat GPT, and you'll find me no harm whatsoever. And you'll see stuff that I've done years ago and continue to do. So I just want to say, Ross, thank you for the opportunity, sir. Really appreciate it.
Oh,
I very much enjoy your website. It's nostalgic. It's a trip down memory lane. I've learned stuff new, and I love the way you find these historic photographs and how they come out of this, and you engage with your viewers and more listeners. And I just want to say thank you for the opportunity, because it's another way of getting the positive message across that sharks and Peter and Stephen and Jaws brought to us, and I'm very appreciative of that.
Oh, well, thank you so much for that. I mean, we've been literally talking for bang on an hour, and it's felt like 5 minutes. I've learned so much, and it's not just the fact that you're obviously so knowledgeable and passionate, but enthusiastic. And we need more advocates and people and voices like yours out there, spreading the positivity, but the grounded in real information, while also being able to enjoy the entertainments and the fruits of something like Jaws as well. So it's amazing to be able to connect with you and to have you spend so much time with us and just to let us into your worlds a little bit. Now it's customary for me to normally leave the last word with the guests. So do you have any final messages for the people watching?
Well, I should have also mentioned, sorry, I do TikTok and marine biology as well. So you can find me there. That's the best place. But customary to leave the last word to the guests, I would just say get out there and learn more about sharks, and spread the message of how important they are to the oceans, and be that conduit. Like Gandhi said, if you're not that, if you want change, be that change. Plain and simple.
Perfect. Wonderful way to end. Guys, thanks so much for joining myself and Rowan. I'll put the links to his profiles in the description of the video. As always, I will see you next time. But until then, I'll drink to your legs and farewell and adieu.